All right, we have this weird video here somebody sent me in my Discord, but FD Signifier, I guess from his one of his side channels or something. The FD Signifier network is real. And it's about Sneako being a G word. Oh, it's about me dying right now. So I'm kind of curious about it because I feel like I've heard people say that before, and I think it's disproportionate. I'm just curious about what he has to say. So let's go.
So depending on what part of the internet you tend to hang out on, you might have seen a very viral
The booby
moment
part of the
recently
internet.
well-known red pill weirdo Sneako having a photo op with some of his oldest fans. And by oldest fans, I mean 11, 12 at most. And it's a heartbreakingly awful moment that will make you lose some faith in humanity. So trigger warnings for all the usual things before I play this clip.
What did you take? Fuck the woman, fuck the woman.
What? Ooh, based alert.
Wait. We love women. We love women.
Where are the parents, though? You know what I mean? I hear conservatives always talking about, I'm gonna beat my goddamn kid if they're disrespectful, and that they hey, where's it at? They must be liberal parents, if you ask me. But I mean, if I saw my kid do something like that, they would definitely get punished. Then again, I also wouldn't make it like a big social media moment. I wouldn't be like, guys, I'm punishing my kid on social media.
Spin Therapy Super Chatted $2. Note how Papa Gut didn't drop any gamer words.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't drop any gamer words. But
we love women. What? Not like transgenders.
Oh.
We love everybody. No. Okay,
that one was the fucking wildest. All gays should die. It was fucking insane to me. I mean, it's just wild. My thing is, in the moment, Sneako didn't do nearly enough to criticize them, and then even afterwards, he defended it. He's like, boys will be boys, and if you have a problem with the homophobia, it's because there's flags in the classroom. It's like, wow, that's fucking insane. You know, he's an unhinged little goblin. He's not a real man. But
yeah, Mark, preach. What have I done?
In this moment, these little boys reflect back to Sneako the exact same rhetoric and energy that he has been spewing out for the better part of a year, complete with misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia.
I wish I had a misogyny right now.
Newfound anti-Semitism, COVID denial, and a little bit of Bitcoin nonsense. And you have the entire Sneako catalog right there on display. I've talked about Sneako a few times. I gave him an empathetic analysis in my conservative sex video, but for the most part, I've been trying to stay away from making too much content about this guy because there's probably no one who is more blatantly grifting on the right wing than Sneako.
Maybe
he genuinely has no.
I mean, I agree with that. Generally speaking, I mean, he's just constantly shifting his perspective based on his favorite content creator. He was like he was like making fun of Andrew Tate for a while. I'd be like, oh, it's not about just having nice cars and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden he becomes a red pillar. I don't think that he's ever had a genuine moment in his life or his career. I think he's always been parroting somebody else that he looks up to, and that's why, like, when you see him in conversations and he gets pressed on any of his beliefs, he doesn't know what to say because he doesn't actually understand what he's saying. He's just saying what somebody else says that he thought sounded cool. So
real solid opinions on anything other than being anti whatever the left or woke
he's anti-woke,
in a given moment.
He's just a sheep in the opposite direction, baby. You know,
genuinely makes me sad. Like, at least Andrew Tate has the traumatic childhood backstory to explain his sociopathic behavior.
What's that? What's his backstory? I don't know.
He just had a bad breakup and started spewing.
I mean, Andrew Tate's a fucking sex trafficking rapist, so I feel more sympathy for Sneako because he's not those things. He's just a fucking moron.
Red pill shit as a result. And then he realized he can make way more money as a foaming at the mouth red pill goofball than a moderately talented filmmaker or comedian. And he's been that ever since. And this is not some theory or attack. He's all but openly admitted that this is the case for him.
My brain has almost been trained to get used to this. It's like, why would I sit down and I used to do these videos where like I would draw on the videos too. Like everything happens for a reason. I did all these drawings and I did set up all these shots and I was stacking cards like going around all over New York City. And thinking about doing that now, spending 2 weeks on a video seems terrible. If I can make one reaction video that has double the views, why, you know, like just it really sucks in a sense because it's like, if you only think about money and views, it's like, why the fuck would I ever go back to that?
Well, yeah, but aren't you supposed to not just think about the money and the views? Right? And also, you can have a reaction channel and a main channel. These are possible things to have.
Probably the saddest thing about this moment is Sneako's reaction because it's clear that he's embarrassed with being faced with the consequences of his grift staring him directly in the face.
Yeah, true. But then he gets back home and he doubles down on it, which is weird. I wonder what it is. I wonder if that's the character. I wonder if we saw the real Sneako like, oh shit, this is too much. And then upon reflection, he was like, how do I grift on it? I don't know.
This face that he's making here is him realizing how much of a groomer he's become. And
yeah, but what do you mean groom? Why is everything fucking grooming now?
That's how he makes his money. It's a face you make when you're deeply embarrassed and ashamed, but you don't want to let that emotional
I agree with that, but a fucking groomer is insane, bro. Come on. Words don't mean anything anymore.
wash over you. So you're just like, I don't know why they would say such things to me. Because you're a groomer, Sneako.
Bro.
That's why.
I like this dude, like, not for nothing, but I feel like it's hard for you to like, it's groomer panic. It doesn't matter if it's progressives or conservatives. Everybody's engaging in fucking groomer panic. It's insane. Like, he's a groomer now. Like, he's a fucking idiot. Absolutely. He's a liar. I think he's a grifter, but a groomer? Because why? Because he had an impact on people with his actions, and then everybody's a groomer then. And every celebrity's a groomer because they've had an impact on people with their decisions. It doesn't make any sense.
You behave the way you behave because you know it gets their attention.
Sure, that's not a groomer.
Them to think you're cool and interesting and give you money.
Okay.
And you feel kind of bad that this is what you've decided to do with your life, but you realize you're not talented enough to be successful doing anything else. Again, this is not a theory. He's all but openly admitted to this as being the case.
But
When I noticed how misogynistic a lot of my fans are and how angry they got at just seeing women on a screen, it's almost like I have a responsibility to try to steer him away from that, because
no, he doesn't. I know this is an older conversation, but I'm pretty sure this conversation comes after he started his bullshit red pill arc, and so, like, he doesn't mean anything that he's saying because he was already dialing up the fucking diarrhea dial on it.
I went down that path and I got out of it, but it can go the wrong way. And the other day I was sitting at the pool, and like these 9-year-old kids were jumping in the pool, and then I noticed them start whispering and pointing at me. I'm like, you were making fun of the fact that 14-year-olds are coming up to me. TikTok, I swear to God, my main channel stuff, it's been people in their 20s, 30s, and everything. Yeah. This streaming stuff, and especially with the fact that I'm viral on TikTok all the time. 9-year-old kids, I've never seen that in my life, and they come up to me, they take a picture, they're excited, and 9-year-olds, it's almost like you have a responsibility to try to be a role model for these kids. Even though I'm not perfect, even though I'm dumb in a lot of ways, I make a lot of mistakes. But the best role model I can be is showing people that I am human.
And I'm sad because it shows that he's not as soulless as one might think. Like, Andrew Tate would have stayed in character the whole time and probably never even have taken pictures with kids in the first place. He'd be too busy beating up women or sword fighting or some shit. But there are better videos about the totality of this specific situation in Sneako. I'm actually a week late on this technically, which is not me being a good commentary guy, but you know, I'm new to this. Of course, Noah Sampson has already looked at the cringe of it all, and Ro Ramden did a really good short video engaging with the heartbreaking nature of this.
Would you feel like you needed to like turn up the intensity of the buzzwords by calling him a fucking groomer? Like, what the fuck is this?
Situation.
Yeah, imagine if those kids went up to Sneako and they said something positive and said nobody would care or cover it. Like, yeah, that's the truth. Yes, of course. That's the point, though. They didn't say something positive. That is the point. They said that gay people should die, so no shit, people are going to be upset about it. But this whole grooming thing is insane.
You should check both of those out. But for me, since I'm late and since I'm me, I got to try to figure out something useful to add to the conversation to legitimize you making a video about this motherfucker.
Buzzwords.
I want to bring it back to the whole how is the left or are we going to save men conversation and use it as yet another example of how boys, literal boys in this case, are groomed into this type of behavior, even in the absence of a bona fide groomer like Sneako.
Listen, here's the problem that I have with this. If you want to decide that everything is grooming now, if you decide to falsely label Sneako as a groomer, which is what's happening, then what you're telling me is the word grooming doesn't mean anything. The word doesn't mean anything on the internet anymore. That word means nothing. Unfortunately, because grooming historically, what grooming is in its most horrible sense is an intentional, methodical, personal, manipulative process of setting up a child for sexual exploitation. There can be other things as well. You could set a child up for a gang or a terrorist organization or to sell drugs. Those are very intense, horrible, horrific, unforgivable things. You can also groom adults in limited situations like Andrew Tate. I agree. But now we're saying that Sneako's grifting shit content is now grooming kids. If you're going to use that, what you're saying is that the word grooming doesn't have any impact anymore. It doesn't mean anything. Do I think that he's guiding people in the wrong direction? Yeah. Do I think he's being deceptive and manipulative and grifty? Yeah, of course. But we're wearing down what the word grooming means. All we're doing. It's the same thing at this point, or it's close to it, as, you know, dumb fucking conservatives who are saying that like gay people are groomers when they're obviously not. The word just, at this point, we're just using that word to mean you're preparing somebody for a thing. But you're trying to maintain the most horrific energy version of that, which is setting a child up for exploitation. for sexual exploitation. You're trying to grab that energy and put it onto the situation, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting because this is just another instance of hyper sensationalized language. We're just sensationalizing language. It means nothing now. This is a fundamental media problem of sensationalizing things, and it just causes a problem. I don't think that it's a positive thing. That we know that it's a problem. So we know sensationalization is a problem. It's just so annoying. It's just frustrating because it's just so frustrating.
To make sense of this, let's look at how Sneako and his supporters responded to the backlash of this moment. In a few tweets and Sneako's response comments from other groups talking about this, you see a lot of people saying stuff like boys will be boys, or this is just how normal boys talk, and they love edgy jokes, and it's no big deal because they don't actually hate gay women and trans people. So first off, the whole boys will be boys stuff is complete bullshit. Women. Most boys are not like this. These boys are like this because these boys...
In general, I would say that young boys have a bigger issue with, I would say like lack of empathy in these cases and like a little bit of like toxicity. I think that is a fundamental trait, or maybe not fundamental, but you see a lot more, spaces dominated by young boys playing like video games, being toxic, saying, rude words, we'll say pro gamer words even. But you shouldn't reserve boys will be boys for that, to be like, oh, boys will be. No, you have to correct the behavior. You're going your formative years. Things need to change. The people, you have to educate people out of being toxic. That's part of it. It's part of life, right? I don't think it's fair to say that, especially to justify to say like, oh, it's just silly jokes. Boys will be boys. But if you're upset about this stuff, why are there fucking gay flags in the classroom? It's like, this is just such a stupid argument,
Boys are shitty. I know I'm not supposed to say this. You're not supposed to talk bad about kids on the internet.
No, kids are assholes.
I have kids. I've worked with kids, and I'm going to let you know, some kids are shitty. These are those kids.
Yeah, a lot of kids
I guarantee you, if you talk to their teachers, babysitters, girls in their class, they'll tell you the truth. And anyone that's worked with kids knows this to be the case. And don't get me wrong, I feel bad for these kids.
Yeah, of course. And a lot of that, I mean, listen, not for nothing, but the reason kids are shitty is 99% of it's their parents. Realistically speaking, if you bring it to any mental health perspective, any kid going through any struggle in their life, this is one of the big reasons why it can be very difficult to have an actual positive impact as a social worker that works in a school, because you'll have a kid that has a behavioral problem, and then guess where it starts? At home. But you really don't have jurisdiction to be like, hey, you're kind of the problem. In a more productive way, you'd say that, of course. But any kid with a behavioral issue, it's like 99% the parents' fault, and a lot of times the parents are not open to engaging in therapy to be a more positive impact. It's just sad shit.
Because they're just kids, and for the most part, it's not their fault for being shitty. And it even sucks for the parents, because now they have to be deeply embarrassed by this and drug through the mud. Fault, so. But I guarantee you, they have parents that will say shit like boys will be boys. Yeah, and I say all of this just to make it clear that these kids were shitty well before they started watching Sneako. Sneako didn't make them shitty. He made them shittier. Their behavior isn't Sneako's fault any more than it's Little Dirk's fault for street crime in Chicago. This is a structural and environmental problem.
So then why would they be a groomer if he's just able to capture people's shittiness? Why does that make him a groomer? Because a groomer would imply, at least in my opinion, that he was like he was making them shitty. But okay.
Problem, not the problem of media consumption for children. In fact, I actually agree with Sneako and his supporters when they say that these kids don't hate women or trans people and are just making edgy jokes. I don't think these boys have had enough life experience to effectively develop that type of bigotry or sexism. Sure. Those things have to be taught first and then engaged with later in life.
Sure. I just, I still don't think it's a positive thing for them to go around saying fuck women. I think that overall, even if they're just like jokes for those kids, it's still a cycle of like slow desensitization of those things, going around saying like, oh, I want gay people to die. I still think it's very dangerous.
Instead, what they're doing is repeating the things they heard Sneako say, which reflects the values that are already being modeled to them in society as a whole. Sneako isn't telling them anything they haven't encountered in their home, school, or church environment. Sneako just happens to be a focal point for this rhetoric to be lionized and celebrated, but it exists outside of Sneako and the red pill and online in general. Like, look at the way that the one kid responds to Sneako as he's trying to clarify who he's supposed to hate.
We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
It's the same type of response you might get if you ask a kid like a quiz question on something they learned at school. He's like,
so dumb,
we hate these specific people, right? He doesn't understand why or even the ramifications.
Right. He's made to understand that he's supposed to hate something that's not men, right? So
aware that if he repeats these things, that makes him good in the eyes of Sneako and society as a whole. Saying we hate gay people, we hate women, we hate transgenders is not an extreme take in our society right now. Going back to the whole thing with Fresh and Fit, understand the fact that Fresh and Fit were able to exist on this platform for years with minimal pushback lets you know how we feel about women in this society. The fact that Matt Walsh, a professed Christian fascist, can make a whole documentary attacking trans people and have it be promoted widely through YouTube with no pushback lets you know how this.
Well, there was significant pushback, but I understand the point you're making. I always find it interesting, this whole Matt Walsh thing, though, where he does what is a woman, and everybody's like, oh my god, he dunked on so many like liberals and all that. What's weird to me, though, is that when he makes this whole documentary about, basically an anti-trans documentary about how women are stinky, or excuse me, about how trans people are like not real or valid. But then when he goes on Joe Rogan, he gets slightly pushed about gay marriage, and he gets pushed about like how many kids are transitioning, and all of a sudden he can't answer basic questions. You know, he'll sit there and he'll be like, oh, yeah, there's like 1 million kids who've transitioned. And Joe Rogan's like, well, it's like 5,000 over the past 3 years. Yeah, I feel like it's 1 million. To me, if you don't have such like a basic point fleshed out, that means that you have done absolutely no research onto what the fuck you're talking about.
Country feels about trans people. These are not bugs. These are features. So this stuff is all passive and normal for everybody and for these boys until 10 years from now when they join a Tiki Torch March or storm the Capitol. And somebody in the comment section is going to be talking about what's happening to men. Why isn't the left doing anything for men? My friend suddenly and without warning is becoming a right-wing nut job. FD, why aren't you doing anything about this? These are not my These boys' first groomer wasn't Sneako. It was an older brother or cousin.
Stop calling everybody groomers, dude. It just triggers me. I'm fucking triggered right now on the groomer panic that we're engaging in. I mean, are we using the historical term of just like setting someone up for a thing? Because I just feel like on the internet, the word grooming, you have to at least clarify what you mean. If you're just talking about the word grooming in the case of setting someone up for a thing, that's fine. But we know that the implication there is like sexual groomer, and we're trying to like co-opt that energy and apply it to here, or just take that energy and apply it to the situation.
Or coach or aunt or pastor, someone that they looked up to, male or female, who didn't bother to engage with them on a level that taught them something as simply as misogyny bad. Society basically expects patriarchy to raise boys. We don't raise boys. We don't teach them things. We just tell them what not to do and then shuffle them along. And we wonder why so many boys are dysfunctional by the time they become men. Like I said, I have little boys. I monitor the things they watch. I talk to them all the time about the messages they're encountering in the world and in society. I'm not up late reading bell hooks to them as bedtime stories, but I'm caring enough to have conversations about the fact that they will inevitably face shitty boys. And so when they face those shitty boys, they'll have some defense against this type of behavior. And if I were to ever see them behaving this way, I would do some very intense, gentle parenting. And don't get me wrong, this is not to say that those of us with better ideas about how to raise boys and how to engage boys in the world should just throw our hands up and never say anything. But it's to respond to this criticism that people aren't doing enough. People refuse to admit that the bulk of red pill consumers are literal children. Red pill ideology is a...
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. I mean, he's got a good point. It's a whole conversation about what is a like, what is a view on the internet. We live in an internet age of complete anonymity where you really don't know the audience of anybody. You don't know anybody's audience. You don't know who's liking your video. You don't know who's commenting on your video. You don't know who's sharing your video. It's an entire group of anonymous people, and you can only effectively guess what the demographic is. Sure, there are some demographic lists when you go on YouTube or TikTok that tells you the age, but most people are just creating accounts saying they're 18 anyway, so it's kind of impossible. And so if you could take all the fans of Red Pill and put them in a room, 99% of those fans will be children. You would need more adults there to chaperone that room, because it would be all little boys jerking off the narrative. But since it's on the internet, we don't look at it and laugh, which is what should happen. And I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be male advocation, but Red Pill is not male advocation. It is trying to bring women down to the level that men feel like they're at, rather than trying to bring men up to a level that makes them feel good about themselves. And so that's really the reason why Red Pill does so well. there's a few adults here and there, mostly fucking uneducated morons who tell women that they have to endure abuse, and then go to Japan and abuse women. It's all it comes down to. So, or Thailand, or whatever the fuck it was.
Natural extension to how so many boys are already being raised and taught in this world. It's boys who have been groomed in a patriarchal society to see the type of goofy antics of a Sneako as amusing and harmless. If you ever watch Sneako's content, it's pretty clear you're not getting highbrow, mind-expanding content. You're getting low-effort toilet humor half the time.
Hey,
that will be most appealing to boys between 11 and 15.
And me.
The worst of those boys might get sucked in deep and stay there for longer, but most will phase out and graduate to Joe Rogan, which is still bad, but at least not as embarrassing.
I mean, I don't think Joe Rogan's that bad. There's some, I mean, of course, there's aspects of everybody that's a little silly, but I like Joe Rogan. I think he's a genuine guy, even if I don't listen to him.
What makes someone a groomer is that they identify vulnerable and impressionable young people, and they take advantage of that vulnerability to extract some type of benefit. For typical,
I don't think that that's a fair assertion. I also don't think it's that deep from Sneako. I don't think he's like, oh, I know I can manipulate kids. I think Sneako's like, I'm fucking stupid and I want to make money. I don't think it's... Dude, this grooming thing is just... I just don't think it's a good thing to whittle down what the word groomer means. I just think it's gonna have a very negative impact to call everything fucking grooming, man. So, okay.
Groomers are usually talking about sex and control over their bodies, but for guys like Sneako, it's money and attention. But the system makes that possible. I used to work in anti-sex trafficking, and the modern discourse on sex trafficking will have you thinking that it's just slick talking pimps in bright fancy suits or evil sex traffickers from Europe snatching children off the streets in white vans. Both of those things are relatively rare for the real problem of the types of girls that become victims to sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is a problem of economics. When young girls and some boys are in dire situations because of a lack of care or stability or resources, they end up in the streets. In fact, one of the biggest predictors of whether or not a girl will end up a victim of sex trafficking is whether or not she runs away from home.
Interesting.
Like, I guarantee if you go and you look through Andrew Tate's sex trafficking case, you'll find that probably many of his victims are girls from meager economic background who the police or the system care little about. The best way to address sex trafficking is to address the economic and social needs of young girls and boys so that they don't fall prey to the groomers and predators who come sniffing around. And the same goes for little boys in red pill nonsense. It's not just the red pill content they consume, it's the social environment that makes red pill content viable in the first place.
Sure, I mean, I agree with all this. We could see similarities between actual grooming and, you know, negative conditioning. But, like, that's what grooming is, right? Grooming is very intense negative conditioning if you break it down fundamentally. We shouldn't call everything fucking grooming that makes us uncomfortable. You know, I don't think something needs to be in line with the word predatory for it to be bad. That's what I think that's, like, one of the problems is not everything has to be some kind of predatory-esque for it to be bad. And I feel like that's the energy we run around with on the internet. It's like it's predatory because that's what grooming is. It doesn't need to be. Sometimes things that are inappropriate are just bad. It doesn't have to be this serious red alert, worst thing in the entire world. The people that are negatively impacted by it don't have to be these individuals who are fucking basically getting mind raped in some capacity. Sometimes it just can be bad on its face. We can explain why. We can explain the negative impacts, the negative outcomes from what's being said here, how toxic it is for young boys to be chasing hatefulness as well as just money and not actually trying to find a life and a partner that they can settle or be with in a positive capacity that makes them feel good about themselves. You know, not everything has to be fucking super predator.
I've heard people critique the idea that the way we talk about identity politics just make people feel bad, and it sounds like original sin, that you're just automatically a bad person if you're a straight white man. And, well,
I mean, I don't know if that's true, but it is in my case.
I really empathize with the idea of being judged based on your appearance. I know that must feel horrible. That argument is mostly cope. It's the fact that people don't want to believe that a system is fixed to produce a specific outcome, even as they see that outcome continue to be reproduced over and over and over again. No matter what shallow down the line interventions people put out there, the same problems have been occurring in our society for literal generations. And some people would rather just say that's naturally how society is supposed to happen than look at themselves and their behavior and how they contribute to those problems happening in the first place. But
sure,
this isn't a full FD Signifier video, so we'll leave that alone. But the lesson I give to you here is don't just mean tweet at Sneako for being a groomer and call yourself counteracting the red pill.
Because he's not a groomer. That's why you probably shouldn't do that. Everything in this video I find to be really solid and positive and stimulating, except for the groomer bullshit. That's the only thing that I think is just so bad.
to work and connect with boys in your community.
Yeah, Jon
Talk
Stewart
to them
groomed
about
me.
this stuff.
Yeah.
Ask them and monitor who they're watching online. Have some talks with them on the nature of the content that they're consuming, and try to do so in a way that pulls them in as opposed to pushes them out. If they are shitty,
Push out my
support
poop.
them on their way out of being shitty. If their parents are shitty,
Punch him. Just
do
kidding.
what you
Don't
can.
do that.
Also, remember, don't start with my videos or highly academic concepts or texts or work. It's going to be too much too soon, and you can probably get much further just by talking about some of their favorite positively masculine characters in media. Like,
I think just like fundamentally speaking, when talking to people about stuff like this, like you don't even want to be fucking super woke. Like this is obviously very intelligent, but most people are just not going to operate with it. You just want to appeal to people on like an empathetic layer. You know, more than anything else, just start there. Try to get through to somebody and try to relate the one experience to their experience. You know, if someone is really religious and they believe in God, and they don't like trans people, I mean, you could try appealing to them in the sense of like, hey, I think what hey, listen, your concept of God, I think is valid. I understand that. I respect it. I think it gives you a really positive sense, a very euphoric sense. And I think if you weren't allowed to practice your religion, it would be so distressing to you that you would probably consider not wanting to be alive. And I can understand that and I can respect it. But the reality is like, hey, listen, like, you know, you can't prove it. It's a faith. And I think it's a beautiful faith, but you can't prove that. And I think that there's something similar to trans people. An internal experience that you can't prove that gives you a euphoria for identifying and a dysphoria if you weren't allowed to identify. And that doesn't mean that it's real. I believe that it is real and valid. But I think fundamentally, you can understand what it's like to have a deep belief in something that makes you feel good about yourself, that doesn't have to be harmful to anybody else. And even if you don't sit here and go like, oh my God, you know, even if you're not super affirming, at the very least, you can understand not being super dismissive or trying to legislate against somebody doing that, right? You could engage in a way that is empathetic with somebody, just kind of go from there, even if it doesn't get through to them immediately. I think that in the long run, that argument can kind of sit and stew, and they can think about it. And then one day you're having a poop, and you're like, "Oh, now I understand what that person meant." So, you know.
both Spider-Man are amazing. Deku from My Hero Academia. Pretty much every iteration of
Deku from My Hero Academia is fucking cringe. Okay, listen, I listen. I'm not gonna say he's the most unlikable character in the world, but oh, what a fucking pussy. I'm not. You know what? I like My Hero Academia. I like that show, but oh my God, what a fucking. Oh, if that show didn't have 100 other characters to carry it along, then it would be fucked. Because that guy's such an asshole. Such a boring little baby. Like, oh my goodness. Let's just be real. Especially after like season 3. This shit went downhill.
the Ninja Turtles. The idea that we don't have positive boy or male role models in the media is bullshit. There's plenty, and you could really start there and get a lot more done. Show them that guys like Sneako and Andrew Tate would be the villains to guys like Spider-Man. All that said, I will leave some academic readings and videos and description. And if you have any other books or pieces of content that are easy to digest as a starting point for counteracting the types of messages
I recommend Sesame Street
that these boys get in society, please leave that in the comment section. Probably try to make like at least a watch list or a reading list for this type of stuff. And we're gonna make the world a little less shitty, one boy at a time. That's all I got for today, y'all. I'm FB Signifier, and this has been Light Work.